So we've had a few polls drop from Emerson College. One of those polls showing that Texas is really good, but in this video, we're going to be talking about how Florida might be competitive. Now, right now it is a 5-point race. It is outside of the margin of error, but it's showing that it is close, at least in the presidential race. And so we're going to talk about that. Now, me personally, I've been working in Florida politics since 1991. I haven't worked the last few years in it, but I do work in it. I do know it quite well. I have been involved extensively with Florida Democratic politics, and on top of that, I have the most accurate predictive model of Florida elections since 2016. Yes, it actually beats Nate Silver's model to a pulp. So I'll link those models down there, and I will have one up for this year. But we're going to talk about this poll that came out that shows Kamala Harris only down by 5 in Florida, and if Florida is possible for the Democrats to win. So let's go ahead and delve into this poll. Now, as you can see in this poll, Kamala Harris has 45.2% to Donald Trump's 49.5%. And this is one of the problems that Democrats have. And I did a video about the math of the Democrats. Very simple type of video that talks about how for Democrats, the math isn't just there. Go ahead and check out that video. I'll link that in a card above, and I'll try to link it below as well. But essentially, the Democrats, because of the problem of voter registration over the last few years, the Democrats can get close in an election now, but they just don't have enough to get over the line in an election. And this is what we're seeing right here. We're basically seeing what could be one of the best case scenarios for Democrats, that it is a 5-point race. But we'll see what happens, but the math just doesn't look like it's there. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the crosstabs when it comes to this poll, because I looked at I've looked at hundreds, maybe over 1,000 crosstabs of Florida polls throughout my 30 years of working in Florida politics. And all of these, and this is why I think this poll is legit, all of these seem pretty spot on. The only one that gives me a little bit, not necessarily a red flag, but maybe a yellow flag, is this Hispanic vote here, showing that Kamala Harris is winning 47.9 to 45.8. So to give you an idea why I have this little yellow flag when it comes to this, mostly has to do with the demographics change within the Latino community in Florida. So in the 1980s, the largest block of voters within Latino voters in Florida were Cuban voters, and most of them were very staunchly Republican. Very much for Reagan, very much for Bush, very staunchly Republican. But as the 1990s and the 2000s come along, we start seeing people who come from other places of origin, such as Puerto Rico, Venezuelans, Colombians, Dominicans, Mexicans, and others. And it's no longer the Cuban voting bloc that has the strongest hold on this demographic. It is now dispersed. And as a matter of fact, if we go ahead and look at the census in the last census we have here, we can see that the Puerto Rican population is getting to the point that it is as close as the Cuban population in Florida, according to the recent estimates. Now, fun fact, if most of you don't know, why are there so many Puerto Ricans in Osceola County and Orange County? Back when Walt Disney was building Walt Disney World, he wanted to find labor that was cheap, but also labor that he could legally bring over to the United States in order to build Walt Disney World. In Puerto Rico ended up being the place where he could get a lot of workers. So many workers from Puerto Rico moved to Walt Disney World area, moved to that South Orange County, North Osceola, West Osceola area, and then they just settled there. So this is the reason why you have this huge concentration of Puerto Rican population within Orange and Osceola counties. Now, over the years, the Cuban population had started becoming more and more democratic, whereas the Puerto Rican population, Mexican population, and others, they were pretty much staunchly Democratic. The one thing about the differences in the two is that Cuban voters would register as Republicans, but a lot of Puerto Rican and Dominican and Venezuelan voters, they would register as non-party affiliates. So you had a lot of situations where you had voters who weren't registering as Democrats, but would more than likely vote Democrat in an election. So this is why you see the NPA number so high. A lot of that NPA number in Florida actually does vote for the Democrats. So starting in 2008, you started to see the Cuban vote go more and more toward the Democrats. But in 2016, this is where it stalled. This was the last time that the Democrats really had a strong hold on the Latino population and them voting significantly Democratic. In 2020, it became a lot worse for the Democrats. And in 2022, Ron DeSantis's election, Marco Rubio's election, the floor fell through. It just absolutely collapsed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at a map right now to look at where these collapses have happened and where maybe the Democrats can make up some ground. All right, so the obvious place to start, I think, is Miami-Dade County, where we see this is the 2020 election. We see how red Hialeah is, which is where most of the Cuban American population is. Now, if we compare this to 2016, we see a lot more blue. And as we look over at the change from 2016, you can see how much more significantly red this area has become. You see 28%, 18%, okay, 99%. Oh, okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, there have been just so many dynamics that have returned this area to being Republican. Now, I have talked to people in Miami-Dade County, and basically they say that this whole communism, socialism thing, especially with Cuban voters, has really stuck. So in this area, can we see some changes amongst the Democrats increasing? Probably not. This is probably an area in Miami-Dade County where we're just going to see it become more and more Republican. These Democratic shades in here, I think, are just pretty much gone for the near future. So Miami-Dade County in the Latino vote there, I don't think that it's going to be increasing. Now, the second place we're going to talk about is Orange and Osceola County. This is mostly population from Puerto Rico. There are Dominicans there, Colombians there, some Venezuelans there. It's actually where I lived a plurality of my life, I would say. I lived in this southwest Orange County area. And again, what you have is, even though these are not Cuban voters, in fact, there are very few Cuban voters in this area, you are still seeing a shift to the Republicans. So if we look at the change from 2016, let's go to Buenaventura Lakes, which is a huge, huge Puerto Rican American voting bloc. As you can see, Biden is still winning in these compared to what Hillary Clinton did, but you see huge, huge losses. And all along this area in Buenaventura Lakes, if you go up Orange Blossom Trail and over by John Young Parkway and stuff, you start seeing a lot of these shifts to the Republicans. And these shifts are significant. It's coming to the point that we have to ask ourselves in 2026, could Darren Soto, the current congressman here, actually lose his seat? Because it became a very, very close race. So what is the prognosis for these? If we're seeing the shift happen in Florida, in the polls, where the Hispanic voters are now starting to show a little bit more favor for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, it's in places like these that are flipping over. Now, if you see, they're pretty Democratic already, 69%, 68%, but again, Democrats need to get back into the 70s, the mid to high 70s in these areas. So if we're looking for ground zero as to where the Hispanic vote is going to shift from starting to go Republican and then snap back to being Democratic, it's gonna be Kissimmee, Osceola County, South Orange, Hunters Creek area, stuff like this. This is where we're gonna see the changes happen. And this will be a pretty significant change. It'll help Darren Soto keep his seats. It might make it might solidify the Democratic base in Orange County, because as of right now, the only Democratic base that that there really is, it's a reliable base. And even though you'll see some you'll see some places, is this Winter Park, 50 and Mills in all this area. These are more reliable, liberal, white Democratic places. This is the African American communities out in Pine Hills and in areas like that. So, and then as you get more west toward Windermere, Winter Garden, it's starting to get a little bit more Democratic. But you have Windermere right there at 65% for Donald Trump. That actually, I wonder, as you can see, the richer white suburbs of Orlando are becoming more Democratic. Even Windermere, which is a shock. I mean, this was the Republican stronghold. And then if you get into the Dr. Phillips area, this is also an area that, interestingly, is split between Democrats and Republicans. And Bay Hill, that's Bay Hill, if you know golf, that's where the golf course is. It's even becoming more Democratic. So Orange County is making a shift, and this could actually play some roles in maybe some state house seats as well, some state Senate seats, also to retain state Senate seats for Democrats. So this, if we're looking for ground zero of where we want to see this Democratic vote shift, where in order for the Democrats to win again, they need to have high turnout amongst Hispanic voters in Orange and Osceola County, and they need to revert back to their old 2014, 2016 voting habits. All right, so the last place we're going to talk about is Pinellas and Hillsborough County. We're not going to talk as much about Pinellas, but we will talk about Hillsborough County. So in Hillsborough County, what you're seeing is you're seeing the opposite of what's happening in Atlanta, Georgia, and honestly in Chicago, Illinois, and the suburbs out there. You're seeing a contraction of the vote. So if you look at Atlanta, and you're seeing the Democratic vote kind of expand outside of the downtown area and into neighboring counties. You see the same thing in Illinois as well, with McHenry County starting to look more blue. Kane County, DuPage County, a strong Republican stronghold for many years, is now very Democratic. You see these expansions, but in Florida, you're seeing a contraction. So you're seeing places like Pasco County that actually did vote Democrat in the past now become a stronger Republican county, and you're starting to see the Democratic vote shrink into the city center. Now, the one place I want to focus on first, focus on Pinellas County. Now, you'll see change from 2016. You see it kind of checkerboard throughout there. But in 2022, when Ron DeSantis won, the Democrats got decimated in every place except for St. Petersburg. Now, if they revert back to their 2016 vote, these places become more Democratic again, well, the Democrats have a chance of picking up the congressional seat there in the 13th congressional district in Florida. As a matter of fact, there was a poll recently to show the Democrat ahead in this congressional district. So that would be really, really good. But I want to focus on West Hillsborough County. So right here going up towards Oldsmar and whatnot. As you can see, large Hispanic population in this area and very, very strong swings to the Republicans. Now, most of these are mixed communities. There are Cubans in the Tampa Bay area, some on the east side of town, some on the west as well, but this is more of a mixed group of a hodgepodge of everyone from every ethnicity or every line of Latino heritage. And we see that in this area, they're also starting to go strongly Republican. So if you see the Orange Osceola, the Hialeah, the areas we were showing in Miami-Dade and here, this is a big problem that Democrats have. So if we look at the poll and all of a sudden we see that Democrats are actually winning, if this Trump number is that strong Republican anti-communism Cuban vote that we have in Miami-Dade, and all the other voters are starting to shift back to the Democratic side, this number in and of itself could be very legitimate. It's still not enough to win, but it's enough to bring the margins down. Now, speaking of winning, this actually now does put the U.S. Senate race in play. This shift, this dynamic absolutely makes it that the Democrats could win the U.S. Senate seats. So if we see here, we have the Democrat, Debbie Merskal-Paul, only down by one on Rick Scott. Now, Rick Scott has been a person who has squeaked by in every election. I'll throw the graphic up right now so you can see all three of the elections that he has had, how close they have been, and this is no exception. So this could be the election where the Democrats actually win a seat. Now, this was a seat that was won before. The Democrats had it under Bill Nelson. Then Rick Scott beat Bill Nelson, and now the Democrats are looking to regain it again. One of the few statewide positions that the Democrats have had in the state of Florida. There have been a few others with Alex Sink as CFO and Nikki Fried as Agriculture Commissioner. Democrats don't usually win on the statewide level, but, and of course, races with Obama and Clinton as well. But this number is significant. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is Mercer Powell is actually up by 6 with Hispanic voters. Now, she is Hispanic herself. Rick Scott has done really well with the Hispanic community because he speaks Spanish quite well, and a lot of Republicans in the state of Florida are good at that. So that's one of the reasons why they've been able to make these inroads, whereas Democrats still to this day really haven't had a really strong Hispanic candidate run for office in the state of Florida, though that looks like it might be changing this election cycle. Now, if this election, if this poll result is accurate, and again, looking at the crosstabs, it looks pretty spot on, this all of a sudden possibly puts her old congressional district, the 27th congressional district, in play. So we have 2 possible congressional districts that could flip to the Democratic side, the Florida 13th and the Florida 27th, which all of a sudden, with how close the House of Representatives is right now, could be key for the Democrats to take over the House of Representatives and have Hakeem Jeffries as the next Speaker of the House. Now, the funding hasn't been that great, so you can see this is the Florida 27th. You can see that cash on hand, the Democrats, I mean, that's of July 31st, so this might have changed with new polling numbers. That's definitely not good. The Republicans have a lot more cash on hand and are in the lead. And then here in the 13th, it's a little bit closer. But like I said, Whitney Fox in a recent poll was up by, I believe, 4%. So that might mean Pinellas County is changing. So this 13th congressional district is definitely one to keep an eye on. So why is this change happening? So we only focused on the Hispanic vote because honestly, there isn't much other vote to focus on. Every other vote that we see, black or white vote or whatever, is pretty much the way that you expected. The breakdown of the electorate is the way that you expected. Now, there are really 3 ways for Florida to win. Now, I have my 3 I always say, which is Democrats need to solidify the young vote, they need to solidify the moderate vote, and they need to solidify the Hispanic vote. That third one is a really big one here. Once the Hispanic vote starts turning back to the Democratic side, then it is looking better. But what the Democrats really need to do, they need to become competitive again in Pinellas, Hillsborough, and other places, but they need to solidify their blue wall, the 3 blue counties in South Florida, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. Now, there is one last thing that everyone overlooks. And the Democratic Party in Florida does it, and the National Democratic Party does it as well, is that there are many, many other large counties that are totally forgotten about, which is usually the reason why these margins exist and the Republicans win. Lee County, Pasco County, Polk County. Take Volusia County. Volusia County used to be a Democratic county, but as the liberal voters started coming into Seminole, those Seminole people started going into Volusia County, Flagler County, St. Johns County, and the St. Augustine. You're starting to see these counties that Pasco, many people don't know about Pasco, has a huge amount of the vote. Lee County, where Fort Myers is, huge amount of the vote. You can say the same thing with Charlotte and Sarasota, Bradenton, and Manatee County. These are counties that a lot of people don't focus on because Democrats usually just say, oh, South Florida, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Duval, Alachua, Leon, Gadsden. That's all we need to know. And that's the problem with Democrats is in Florida, that's all they know. They only know those few counties. Once they understand and start making inroads, especially into Polk County, into Lake County, into Pasco County, even Hernando and Citrus County, and trying to bring down the margins in Volusia, much of the old I-4 corridor, it's not the old I-4 corridor, it is still the I-4 corridor, then Democrats will be competitive and in the lead. But their absolute being obtuse to anything outside of what votes blue is their biggest problem. Okay, I just want to do this small video about Florida. It's a little longer than I thought, but I'm not surprised. I could probably go on for like an hour or two about Florida. Make sure you subscribe, click the button, be notified. Thank you all very much. I will see you tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.